At eRoad, we believe fleet management doesn't have to be problematic. It should be effortless, connected, and future-ready for your heavy-duty operation. With a reliable, accurate technology solution, you can elevate your fleet's performance, improve productivity across your business, monitor events as they happen, and reduce costs and downtime. Get on the road to better fleet management and safer, more productive operations. Go beyond the basics and visit eRoad.com today.
Running on Ice, the coolest community in freight. I'm your host, Mary O'Connell, bringing you the latest tech updates, warehouse news, and everything happening in the cold chain world. Not only is there the coolest show in freight, but there's Running on Ice, the newsletter that could not be colder. You can subscribe to that on FreightWaves.com/runningonIce. Today, we welcome back the one and only Thomas Wasson, trucking analyst here at FreightWaves. Welcome back to the show, Thomas.
I'm back. I've saved a bunch of cold chain stuff for you. I've been in travels. I've been places. I've seen drones. I've seen other types of drones with stair-step ladders, and I found Reefer batteries. So my travels, it's like Gulliver's travels for Reefer Madness, and I'm excited to be here to share them.
I like it. It's like the Chronicles of Narnia style. You went through the wardrobe, and instead of finding a lion and a witch, you found really cool Reefer technology.
It was good. I didn't have to fight in World War I for it and be scarred enough to become a writer. So, it was a great deal. Poor Tolkien and the other guys, they had it a little bit rough. If you saw what they saw, you created things like dwarves and elves. That's some crazy stuff. At least with our stuff in the cold chain, it's phenomenal. It's a lot less exciting, but it's getting excited. So I think that's going to be one of the coolest things. And it kind of ties into it because the warehouses... Oh man, I even have one where they turned them into little avatars. So we're doing some foreshadowing as a persuasion principle right now, but you're in for a show if I can remember it all.
I absolutely love it. I'm almost hesitant to tell you that there are warehouses that exist in the cold chain that are manned. They're just all dark. They're manned by robots and autonomous vehicles. They don't have lights on. It's just there.
Well, it's a persistent labor issue, too. They're running into this labor problem, and I spoke to a few folks. My favorite one was I interviewed somebody, and back in the day, the hobos were really just traveling labor that used the rails before the current connotation. And so hobos are still alive in the traditional sense in that they have seasonal hourly labor that comes in and they just randomly leave. So they'll show up in a city, apply, they've got a forklift operator license, and this apparently is common. And they'll just show up for a few weeks. They're like, all right, got enough cash, I'm gonna go to the next city. It's like watching that Roddy Piper movie and They Live, where he just takes a train to a construction site and just shows up. I thought that was just a cultural anachronism, but in fact, it's real in the warehousing space. And never would have expected that. So it makes a lot of sense why they try to automate it, because it's really hard to get people to do the labor at what you want to pay them, not what they want to be paid.
It's also hard because, think about it. If I said, hey, Thomas, do you want to come work for me in a refrigerator or a freezer all day, every day for 12 hours at a time? You're probably not going to be as excited about that.
Oh yeah, and it's hard work. There's danger, things can fall on you. I had that happen to a lot of drivers. They'd be unloading the trailer and it'd be like driver assist. The number one injury was stacks of pallets falling on them from Dollar General. You can get a Purple Heart doing that. And I think that's one of the larger trends, I guess, that the cold chain is having to deal with than everyone else is just, you either automate the labor or you find other sources of labor that may do it for cheaper. And so we're going to see my favorite ones that I saw. So I was at Act Expo. I'm going to go into my yarn. I'm spinning it. And Act Expo and Manifest were both really fun events. So the one thing I noticed is they have these things that are automated warehouse bots. And the goal is to just scan things. So I didn't know how important it was to just keep an inventory count. And so there's one of these that looks like a giant oil rig driller. It's got this big old pointy thing, and then it looks like a forklift. And it just moves around and it snaps pictures. And that was the coolest thing in the world. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why would you spend all that money? Well, it turns out that you can simply automate it and have that, and it saves the effort of somebody else having to take their own genie lift, scan, move forward, scan, and that's the cool stuff. I think that's the first thing I saw is the automation in terms of hardware has definitely picked up. The second one, because I'm going to go a little long on this, is the Avatar ones. So I'm at a Samsara event, and it's Arc Best. And I'm like, Arc Best, I know them from like the LTL space. They got some warehouses and stuff. That's cool. Well, Arc Best uses autonomous forklifts. And so this fun story is that it'll navigate itself to where it needs to be. But the human operators working in were like kind of freaked out a little bit. They're like, "Ooh, what's this thing doing next to me?" So they took like an iPad. It's literally like a comedy show, and they flipped it over, and there was an operator, a remote operator would then take over like Avatar. Instead of a little blue Navi guy, you take over the forklift, and it would show their face, and they'd start doing the actual stuff. And so then the forklift guys were like, "Hey Bob, how's it going?" And Bob's in like an office 200 miles away, and he's like, "Hey Steve, not bad. How about you?" And it's this weird symbiosis that you would think wouldn't work. And some tech guy will say, "Well, we can fully automate it." You don't understand the value of just having a dude's face on an iPad or a dudette, and then like they take it over because it was cheaper for Arc Best. They're like, "We figured out how to make sure it doesn't run into things," which was a big deal, by the way, in the world of robotics. But they're like, "Well, it's a little too expensive to figure out the actual act of making sure you don't just stab through it with the equivalent of giant tongs on a forklift." And so this was the greatest thing in the world. So now I just can't get it out of my brain that in the autonomy space we have the equivalent of Avatar, and the other equivalent's Westworld. I'll go into that one day. And so we're literally just avataring our forklifts. And apparently from, conversations with Arc Best in their showcase, it was very successful. And it's that little human element. Most fascinating story. I love it. Avatar on a forklift.
I do love Avatar on a forklift. I see their Avatar on a forklift and raise you drones that fly through the warehouse and take inventory. Not only inventory, they can scan pictures, or they can scan the items and then also provide a picture of exactly where it was in the warehouse and then what it's been next to and all of that. So I see that. And I raise you some really cool tech. That's one of the things that I do love the most about the cold chain right now is that, how like 5-6 years ago, like I really feel like dry van got its time. It got the cool things, it got the innovations, and now cold chain has busted down that door and said, sit down, we're gonna make it even better.
It's really fun because it's the IoT, the Internet of Things devices, which was the rage 10 years ago. Now with AI, we can finally answer these questions. And so I like the drone ones. I saw two of them. I think it was Manifest. It was Manifest. They had the little drones, and the drone had a little mini charger. So like how you put your phone down on a charger. And so every few minutes you just naturally automate it and go and just start scanning in a little thing, and then go and sit back down. And 5 years ago, we were having conversations with people who were happy enough to have a drone operator. That was one of the big things, drone operator in a warehouse. And so now with the automation, like it's not a hard math problem because you just have to teach the drone, don't run into things. And then you have to teach it to find a barcode. It's not like a Ukrainian drone where it has to magically deploy and locate, is this an airplane, and then try to explode. See, our drones in the supply chain are a little bit more simpler, and they're really disposable too. So if you lose a drone, we took one out at Covenant one time. We were looking at Nikola. It got caught by a gust of wind and ran into the flagpole. Matt McClellan, shout out to Matt McClellan. Put this in the clip. So we were doing this, talking about drone technology, and we're trying to get some good shots. And Matt's a drone enthusiast. So we're out here talking to Matt, looking at these Nikola Covenant trucks like 4 years ago. And our drone's getting dangerously close to the flag, and a gust of wind hits it. And like goes, falls back down. Matt's like, "I got you. It's okay." So Matt has his own drone, and he pulls this thing out. He just starts zipping, and we're like, "We're supposed to interview you, man." He's like, "Oh, hang on, I'm gonna get some good shots." He's zipping the drone around and stuff. And so like having that automation, the reason I'm bringing up Matt's story is because one of the conversations is that they actually they make the drones now to where if the gust of wind, it's not going to be screwed. And so now we're at this point where it's just fully automated. And for these warehouses and cold chain, that's a huge deal. I'm a broker, former broker, truckload guy. You've done cold chain. You know what it's like. Melting ice cream, keeping things cold. A reefer doesn't freeze it. A reefer keeps it where it needs to be. And the problem is if the reefer is not good enough, it quickly does not become where it needs to be, and then you get mushy ice cream. So like the cold chain stuff, I like always looking at running on ice because it's really the stuff that works there will matriculate down into the less sexy dry van spaces, where I'm hanging out.
I also just feel like there's a lot cooler innovations just because of the industry verticals that cold chain touches. Like you'll see stuff from pharmaceuticals and other stuff like that. One more thing about drones before we beat that horse dead. There's a kind of a low tech drone that exists in a lot of rural parts of the world, that maybe, I know there's parts of rural Africa where I think I might be wrong. I think it's Kenya that these have happened in. I don't remember. But basically when it's too rainy and the road washes out, they can't get medicine to people. But also some of the remote villages, there's not necessarily a plethora of electricity. So they figured out a way to kind of like launch medicines with, for lack of a better comparison, a giant paper airplane drone where it doesn't necessarily need the electricity. It doesn't need to be charged. You can just kind of like wing it a little, like literally wing it. And it'll make it through where it needs to be. Obviously the technology behind it is much more sophisticated than the horrible job I'm doing explaining it. But that's always something that has fascinated me, is that, even though, because like those people, they do need those resources, they do need that. And to still be able to get that for them, it's just one of the reasons the cold chain's pretty freaking dope.
I like and it's pharmaceuticals and cold chain. I think that's driving a lot of innovation as well, because I hate to give I'm going to cast some shade on dry van, but I mean, to be honest with you, like, we don't put a lot of expensive crap in a dry van. I mean, you can move electronics, but generally it's bulk goods, bulk retail. It's not a lot of, but if it's pharmaceuticals and it's a vaccine that cannot get cold, you're going to bet your sweet butt that they're going to find a way to make sure that thing does not get cold, or that it stays cold, or that it stays at the temperature. And my favorite are the ones I was at. Where was I at? I was at ACT Expo. And so on the Reefer tech as well. So they're using IoT devices inside the warehouses to monitor temperatures and gauge all of that. Well, in the Reefer trailers now, they're doing a lot better job at zonal control with placements of sensors and stuff. And so the biggest challenge in the past has been, how do you power all of this stuff? Because you have a refrigerator that's normally a fuel gas engine, and that works, but you have to plug that thing into a truck to get access to the power a lot of times. It's got to be powered. And so these guys called Range Energy, they're just Range, look them up. They've designed a trailer that is, so it originally was, it's got a battery in it. And it's supposed to help you as as you're driving and stuff, but it provides power, and it kind of operates as like an APU as well. So now all of these sensors and stuff are being able to be used, and you can figure it out. And it's also providing assistance as like a drivetrain too. So you get this rechargeable battery that's rolling around, and it's helping with the cold chain, because beforehand, if my reefer trailer is being stuck somewhere, I can't just keep an idling unit to it. And so we're seeing some really cool developments in that space. Now, weight is always a concern, but with a lot of reefer goods, you don't have to pack that thing to the brim, because typically it's more viable stuff and you can afford the shipment if you need a full truck. So there's some really cool developments in the trucking space that I think in the past 3 or 4 years, as battery tech's getting easier and we're finally answering all these questions with these devices, and we have the AI to process it, that we're gonna see things get a little bit better from that perspective. And shout out to the U.S., by the way, cold chain. We have a phenomenal cold chain. I think countries like China and other ones, remember when COVID happened, their cold chain wasn't really prepared for handling it, because a lot of Chinese consumers would buy locally and they had tiny fridges. It's the tiny fridge problem, just like Europe, tiny fridge problem. Here in America, you get like a Costco-sized freezer. You can hide like 3 bodies or 2 deer, and we have the hunger and the demand for a robust cold chain. So anyone gives the U.S. a hard time. We win in 2 areas, okay? We have handicapped accessible ramps through the ADA, and we have a very nice cold chain. And so don't let anybody give you a hard time. I know July 4th is coming up. So when we're thinking out there, when you're talking to your friends in your 4th of July barbecue, you remind them that hot dog and that hamburger and that brewski they're drinking, or cold libation, is a byproduct of a very extensive cold chain.
Summer, brought to you by the cold chain.
Keeping it cool.
Speaking of summer, we are in what I like to say is the I'm not gonna lie, it's not the best time to be a freight broker or someone that needs to move some freight at this moment in time because um, those carriers really they really do tend to just dip out and go for the produce freight because we are in officially produce season, not to be confused with harvest season, which happens at the end of the summer, and that is for your row crops, your cotton, your canola, your soybeans, your corn, et cetera, which is where I got to start. But that did mean planting season. I was up against produce season, which was the worst of all. Because apparently if you're already good to haul agriculture, then you're also, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump over to the produce world. So that being said, Thomas, do you have any like visceral reactions when it's produce season, when we start to see the southern tip of Florida, increase those reefer outbound tender rejections, and we see those volumes rise because we're harvesting, what is it, oranges?
Oranges, yeah. Grapefruits, tropical style fruit.
Yeah, all those citruses. Do you have any visceral, like, oh no, produce season's here, like trapped in your bones?
I got two dogs in me. One dog is like, look, it's produce season. Screw the freight brokers. Let's rip. I'm gonna get my dry vans down into Florida, make some fat rips. I'm gonna get $5,500, $6,000 from Indy to Miami. I'm gonna forget about my truck for a few days. And then I'm gonna get, try to get me a good little back haul, kick it up to Atlanta, and then start the process all over again. But as a broker, I was so as carrier sales, it was really bad because I'd call and they just hang up on me and they'd be like $500 more. Well, can you do any better? Click. And when people tell you about a driver shortage, I don't have much sympathy. You haven't been hung up on, and I managed drivers, okay? I've dealt with angry drivers. So these people saying, well, you don't understand. Oh, I understand. I had 2,500 of them at one time, and I've gone anywhere from 5 to 10. I've been all over the place with drivers. I loved my drivers, but it's like your kids. You love your kids, you don't love everyone else's kids. And so those other drivers would hang up on me and hurt my feelings and ask for $500 more and all that. So as a broker, it was hard doing the sales job. But when you're an account executive, it gets even funnier because we did some reefer stuff, running reefer loads like that. Then the sales guys would give you carriers who can't understand, or they lied about pre-temping their vehicles, or they decided to get unloaded and they didn't get it to the right temperature, or they can't read, so they can't read the rate confirmation, or they didn't pass on the rate confirmation. And so it was always a challenge, and they charged you too much money. And so you're like between a rock and a hard place. And then the customer looks at you like you're some joker, like, why didn't you know any better? It's like, bro, I'm barely hanging in. I'm the account executive. The sales guy said we always buy it this way. We don't always buy it this way because the sales guy doesn't know how to read, and he figured out they were selling it to a mega carrier, and that's the only reason the rate was the way it is. And then they get really mad and they say, well, you should just buy better. And I was like, buy better? What do you mean? So I'd have to post my own loads on DAT, just slinging my own freight because, God help us if we had a Chicago split model where there's a whole carrier floor. And there's a little drama too. If you were not a cool AE, they wouldn't cover your stuff. And so they'd be a little spicy butts compared to a cradle to grave. And so I'd have to do favors and cajole them to try to get my loads. And if they knew my sales guy was dumb too, then they would also try not to do it. So it was hilarious. God bless reefer season, produce season. It's just a beautiful cluster. I don't miss it, but I love the stories. Ice cream was the worst. Produce, apples are really bad. Make sure that you just put apples in like a reefer. And someone's going to say put it in a dry van. God help you. I did it in a dry van one time. It turned into applesauce. And it got like a crust at the bottom. I swear to God, it turned into brandy. It was going to an apple juice plant, and they just take the trailer and dump it all in. I'm happy to see the return to seasonality. We're looking at the data. I'm going to look to the right here on my little sonar data. Reefer tender rejections over 10%. That's in the money right there. And they've been hanging out. Earlier this year was 20%. There's less reefer capacity. We're looking pretty good on a year-over-year comp. And when we're looking at the rates, though, there's this weird dichotomy where, like, even though upstream it's good, reefer spot rates are actually lower than like 2023, and we're about the same place as last year. So we're in this weird thing where, like, if you're a big reefer carrier, things are pretty good. If you're a small reefer carrier, you're in the trenches right now. you've got to be choosy, and you've got to be, especially thinking of your cold chain, paying attention to your cold chain facilities. You know more than I do. Just like drive in, know your facilities, know your location, because if you're not a big mega carrier trying to hook it up or do a preload or some other stuff, you may be in for a bad time, because the supply chain loves to take advantage of drivers' time, and then they complain why their reefer unit got too warm.
That is the forever debate in the cold chain side of things is, what temperature should your reefer be set at? Why is it not at that temperature? Well, it was at that temperature and it's set on continuous, but it was at that temperature when I backed up to the dock 2 hours ago. So it's just been sitting here getting warm, blah, blah, blah. That is a debate that I think if I go a week without hearing someone like just knee jerk say that's a problem, then I think it might be the end of times.
And it's hard for these cold chain facilities because it takes a lot it takes a lot of energy to cool these things down. And so one thing I like from a fleet standpoint is that with these sensors in the reefer trailers now and all this technology, I can now show that it wasn't my fault. And I think drivers are very hostile to tech sometimes. But the secret is always make sure it's not your fault. I learned that in my corporate days. Just never say it is. Politicians do it all the time. So can account managers and drivers. And so, one of the biggest challenges, like you say, is like the trailer needs to be here. It's at a dock. But as soon as it opens up, the temperature is different. And so you're going to have to prove that you did your end right, but they didn't do their end right. And that's still one of the biggest bottlenecks, is just how do you manage a warehouse, which is like a foreign alien concept to the trucking part. And it's like two very different cultures of transportation meeting. It's like the Atlantic and the Pacific. It's like, when you see the Amazon rainforest and the muddy water just meets in the ocean and it doesn't want to mix. It's like trying to mix your salad dressing.
It's like trying to mix oil and water.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the one thing I'm excited about the technology is that it's finally starting to bridge that gap to where we can figure it out, because of for a lot of these customers, I've seen it all the time, they really don't know what goes on. And if you're a smart warehouse manager, you lie and blame it on the carrier. That's also your pathway to success. And you always file a claim and say it's their fault. So you've got to automatically trust. So we're building trust.
Thomas, you are actively going against everything that we've talked about on the show, which is to not immediately blame it on the carrier or not immediately blame it on people. You got to figure out what the root of the problem is.
We get to that after the blaming happens. It's kind of a preamble, you have the national anthem before a football game. Well, you got to get those emails where the customer accuses you of something first. And then we yell at each other. We have some words. And then finally we come together, and then we get to the point where we should have been, which is let's root cause the problem. But I'm all about making sure everyone's on the same page. But from my personal experience, I swear, first time I try to be nice, somebody tries to shank me in an email. It's just like, come on, guys. Like, it's a load of ice cream. I have the paperwork. Here's the details. Here's the bill of lading. It was this. And then I think I love the fact, because people talk about AI replacing jobs and all that stuff. You got to have someone to blame. People need a person to yell at. And I think as a freight broker, and a fleet manager, and a driver, we provide that opportunity and service to yell at somebody. And it's a three-way therapeutic yell fest. And so it's just not the same yelling at a chatbot. And even the Chat GPT ones nowadays, they get their feelings hurt.
The chatbots do not understand passive aggression. I have learned that as I have tried many a chatbots, and I've gone, wow, cool. So you're really just not into helping your customers. I love that for me. They don't care about that. However, when you try that on a person, you can use their own customer service expectations against them. And that's honestly my favorite pastime of, if I am extremely angry about a situation, I will look up their customer service values and start using every single one of them against them and how they have done me wrong. But that's also, again, the very petty side of me. And
Did you ever bring up their mission statement?
Oh,
Please, yes.
Thomas, that's rookie moves. That's rookie moves.
Core values. That's like bureaucratic kung fu. You're like kung fu panda bureaucrats.
Look, I ain't never met my journeys into the customer service world is a different conversation for a different day. But that being said, Thomas, we are running out of time today. So There's a question that we've been putting on both Check Call and Running on Ice, and I don't think you've gotten it yet. And that is, if you could build a house out of any food, what would you choose?
Ooh, that's a tough one. What I have to, well, no, it's just first thing, because I'm going to ask too many questions and complicate it. Wait,
Mm-hmm.
I need like 10 seconds here because there's some opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. Any food, any food. You know what? Fruitcake. It turns, because it's very like squishy at first, but it will turn into a brick and harden.
Okay.
So if I'm thinking of a structural building material, at first, the first day or two, my fruitcake house is going to struggle.
Right.
But after like a week of it hardening and condensing into that horrid thing that people buy, I think it would be the closest to a mortar. That's probably it. My meme take would be hot dogs and be like, come to the hot dog house. And then people are like, Thomas, that's really inappropriate. I was like, no, I've made this out of my building materials. You need to come here because by a day, all the animals in the neighborhood will eat it.
I think a hot
So
dog
it's like
house
an
would
art
just
installation.
smell horrible.
Oh, it would. It would. Have you ever seen like, oh gosh, yeah, making hot dogs and the whole process, like it's a very disgusting thing. But that's
Yeah.
my humorous meme take, just
Okay.
to get a joke in, non-serious at all. The fruitcake one is very serious though. It's a mortar and pestle kind.
The fruitcake is solid. We have not had a fruitcake yet, or a hot dog for that matter, but I'm going to focus on the fruitcake house because the hot dog one just makes me upset. So,
Well, that's the haunted house. It's for Halloween.
oh, ugh. Anyway.
All the ones I didn't get in on July 4th.
Ugh. All right, Thomas. If someone has what they think a hot dog house would smell like, or if they have any other cool cold chain tech that they wanna let you know about, where can they find you outside the show?
And check me out, FreightWaves.com sign up for the newsletter, Loaded and Rolling, Truck Tech. It's on the website. If you just Google Thomas Wasson, I finally beat the other one. I've got tons of stuff on there. You can read my articles and you can check me out on like the X platform. I get around. I have the best job in the world. But yeah, if you bring up the hot dog house, that means you made it to the end of this episode and you get internet points.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Thomas.
Appreciate it.
You can catch other episodes of Running on Ice right here on FreightWaves TV, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts like Apple Podcast and Spotify. Need more Running on Ice news? No sweat. Subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. See you on the internet.